Hello and welcome along to the Panto podcast. This week my guest is Mervyn Francis, who's celebrating his 50th year in the business. In this episode he tells me how the business has changed, his directing style, and playing his dream role, Mother Goose. So please, sit back and enjoy the latest Panto podcast. My guest for today's Panto podcast is, 50 years in the business now, and still going strong. Mervyn Francis, hello, welcome along.
Hi Hayden.
And I'm here in your lovely home. I can see posters all over the place. So you're obviously very proud of what you've done over the years.
Yes, it's quite a collection. I'm living with my ghosts. Some of them have passed, as you can see.
Yes.
But yes, it's comforting. 50 years in the business. So I celebrated it actually with appearing in Mother Goose, which has always been one of my ambitions, to appear as Mother Goose after watching John Inman portray the part. And he absolutely made it his own. And it was always my ambition to play Mother Goose. And Tom Ralph gave me the opportunity, which was absolutely wonderful. So that really was a great celebration for me after 50 years in show business. And I started way back in 1968, having been an amateur for many years as a lad, appearing in local operatic societies and local variety shows in my hometown of Redditch at the Palace Theatre. And for me, it was like a case of following in Mother's footsteps. My mum was on the stage. She was a dancer and also did an acro act as well. And she appeared in quite famous shows in her time. One particular was Makar and his Dutch Serenaders, a big touring show of the 40s. And also she was one of the Marie de Vere dancers who appeared as Dorchester Lovelies at the Dorchester Hotel on Park Avenue. And they were renowned for having one of the best can-cans outside of the Moulin Rouge. So I suppose you could say it was in the blood. And I got interested in show business at a very early age. And I suppose it was just natural that it would follow through. And while I was appearing as an amateur, I used to attend a performing arts college at weekends until I actually went away with one of my best friends to do a summer season as a holiday camp entertainer on the Isle of Wight. That was in 1968. And then in 69, that is when my theatre career started. After many auditions, I signed a contract with Robert Luff for 4 years. And I was kind of in constant work for 4 years, going between the Bachelor's Show and the Black and White Minstrels, two very spectacular shows of the day. Which I was very proud to be in.
You said your mum was an acro act.
Yeah.
What kind of thing was she doing, and did you see it?
I've seen photographs, bending over backwards on boxes, and she's still pretty nimble at 89, and she's still quite active. Yeah.
So all the through hoops and everything, and
yeah, she did all that, and she was a very good dancer and a very good tap dancer as well. So I kind of had a theatre grounding, I suppose.
And were you watching from the wings?
No, I was never there at that time. Her career had finished then. But I guess it was in the genes. Yeah. And then after years of working for Robert Luff, I kind of progressed to playing Principal Boy in many touring productions, touring the provinces. For 10 years I toured with Snow White through basically a producer by the name of Aubrey Phillips, known to a lot of people. And we toured the length and breadth of the country, playing a lot of the number ones. And yeah, it was a great experience playing opposite up-and-coming artists such as Lisa Stansfield, to name but one. So we were all doing our national service at that time, doing the provinces. And then I was introduced to Dougie Chapman through Beryl Johnson, and I had an association with Dougie for about 30 odd years, directing for him, appearing as an artist, acting as company manager, and we had a long association, and every year I would do pantomime for him. In fact, this year was to be my 50, it would have been 51 pantomimes this year, but whether it will happen or not, who knows? We're just waiting to hear at the moment. But yeah, I love pantomime. For years I specialised as a villain and then moved on to playing dane. I suppose that's my main forte at the moment, playing dame, I would say.
When you were a child then, did you go and see many pantomimes?
Oh yes, I did, yes. I would always be taken to the Birmingham Hippodrome or the Alexandra Theatre in Birmingham. And I couldn't wait to be up on there on that stage. And then years later, when I had the opportunity to appear at the Hippodrome and the Alex, it was like a dream come true. Great experiences.
Anybody from them days that you can remember?
Oh yes, funny enough, I remember going to see Norman Wisdom. I was in awe of Norman Wisdom. I absolutely adored him. And Eve Boswell played Aladdin as well, I remember. And Dickie Valentine, and many great stars of the day. It's strange how the business has changed, really, because in those days, the artists who appeared in pantomime would be the artists that appeared in Summer Season, that appeared on the TV, made the records. It was all one business. But now it seems so different, where pop world is a business on its own, and then what's left of variety is again a business on its own. So it's all split, unfortunately, but in those days it was one great business.
Do you think with what's happening now in the world, it could possibly come back together?
You know, they say never. Well, I think many things in life turn a circle, so one would hope so. Once we can all get back to work, that would be wonderful to see variety come back in a big way. I know so many of us would love to see that happen. Yeah.
A lot of people as well have been entertaining online. You've been entertaining yourself,
Yeah.
with your singing. How's that been for you over these past few months?
Well, it's given me a reason to have a shave, for one thing.
I had that at the beginning of lockdown. I thought, I'll grow a lockdown beard, never again.
I did have a little bit of a wobble on week 6, and I thought, oh dear, where's this all going to end? And then I picked myself up and I thought, yeah, let's start singing. Let's do a song each week. And then as it went on, I seemed to pick up a little following, which kind of gave me the boost to carry on. And I think we've all had to find our own way through this pandemic as best we can, really. You know, whatever works for you, it's got to be that thing that works for you, isn't it, really?
Well, pantomime, I think, is just might not happen this year, but when it does come back, boy, we're going to be up for one big party.
Absolutely, yeah, I can't wait. And this, if I go back, I'm supposed to be going back to Hunstanton this year, and if I do go back, that will be my 6th season at Hunstanton. Not consecutive, I did have a year off, but be my 3rd year playing dane. Built up a little following there as dane. And the people of Hunstanton are lovely. I love the Norwich people and the Norfolk people and that area.
Has Mum seen you perform as Dame?
Oh yes.
What does she make of it?
I think she's a bit bewildered, to be honest. Yeah, she's a bit bewildered. She said to me on many occasions, oh, I never thought you would end up playing Dame, watching you sing for years. And then she watched me play the villain for years and years and became the nasty. And now I think she's absolutely gobsmacked now to watch me in dresses, you know, but whatever works, you know.
Is there any of Mum or any other relatives in your Dame?
There are certain people, an auntie, extrovert aunt is there. Yeah. And I was a great a lover of Old Mother Riley, so I try and put a bit of Arthur Lucan in there. And yeah, it's a different character entirely to anything else I do.
Well, there's so many different branches of Dame as well. How some people play it. Some people play it like the Great Danny, and other people play it like Old Mother Riley style, very much like a Berwick character. And yours, how long did it take you to actually come up with your Dame? I mean, what were you doing in preparation for it?
Well, I think the character changes as you put the makeup on. You sit at the dressing table, you start to get ready slowly, and you put the tights on, and you start to put the clothes on, the underclothes to start with, and then apply the makeup before you put the final touches with the wig and the dresses, and then you slowly change into the character, and you become that character. Yeah, it's a process that takes, I suppose, in preparation to do it well, about an hour. I don't like to be rushed. I do like to take my time to get ready and do good makeup. Although I don't go mad on the makeup, I think you still need to look like a man, dressed as a woman who still looks like a man, in order to make it funny. Yeah.
And lovable, of course.
And lovable and warm, to be warm. I think warmth is a very big factor.
Was it difficult then going from baddie to Dame?
No, because I had actually played Dame before I played baddie. So
right, okay.
yeah. So actually, it was going back into the Dame after playing baddie. I equally love doing baddie, actually, and I used to really get into it. And the more the kids booed you, well, you knew you were doing the job right. And it was a great audience participation. But I do get a lot out of playing Dame, probably more than even the villain. Because, you know, the amount of kids that queue up to have photographs with you and meet and greet afterwards, they obviously love the Dame. So you do get a lot of job satisfaction from playing that role. Yeah.
Who have been your favourite Dames then to watch over the years? You mentioned earlier John Inman.
Oh, John. I adored John. I toured with John, actually, for Dougie. So I got to know him very well. Dougie hired me a car, and I actually drove he and his friend Ron around, and the stories were hilarious that John used to tell. So yeah, I had a great affinity with John, and he was a superb Dame. And of the old style Dame, I loved Norman Evans. He was absolutely wonderful over the garden wall. And of course, I loved Les Dawson with his Sissy and Ada, with you know, that was magic as far as I was concerned. And also thinking back was Clarkson Rose, and one of my very favourites was George Lacey. He was a superb Dame as well. Oh, there were so many, yeah.
Did you see George Lacey perform then?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Dougie employed him, and he was wonderful in old time music hall as well. He would play the piano. Nice little tune, isn't it? He used to say, and yeah, he was a great character.
So how did you and Dougie first forge that friendship?
Well, I was appearing with Beryl in Pantomime, and Dougie came to see the show, and he said, "Oh, great show." I said, "We've met before, Dougie. I'm Mervyn." He said, "No, you're not. You're Robin Hood at Christmas at Skegness," and that was the start of it. And it was a start of an association that was to last 30 odd years. He was a wonderful man, and anybody who was anybody had worked for him at one time or another, or the number one producers around now even had probably worked for him at some time or another. People like the great Nick Thomas with his puppets, and David Lee, and there were so many, Johnny Spillers, different people that had worked for Dougie over the years. Yeah, Tony Pierce. And they, you know, always remembered Dougie with much affection. Yeah.
Have you ever thought about writing your memoirs?
It would be, I think I'd have to sit down for a long, long time to recall it all. Going way back to, it wasn't always great. I mean, I did have some rough times when I first went down to London and lived in London looking for work, and did many other little sideline jobs in order to survive, until I got my break with Robert Luff. And you just keep, like, I suppose, being persistent and hoping that one day something will turn up. And I was lucky enough to have a recall. I was told I'd got through with the singing side into the minstrels, but my movement wasn't good enough. So I went to take some dance lessons, then reapplied, and I got through. So you have to do what you have to do, I suppose, in order to succeed.
Yeah. Was the business easier then than it is now, do you think?
I think, well, it's always been hard, and there's always been a lot of people for, say, even for one job. But I think it's even harder now, to be honest, because everything is so sophisticated now, and you have to have a great understanding of, I suppose, technology as well, in order to kind of promote yourself in a proper way. In those days, we just took a CV with us, walked around the streets, and that was it. But now they want show reels and everything else online. And probably now you wouldn't get an interview, you just have to send off the show reels. And particularly now with what we're going through with this pandemic, no one would want you even to turn up on the doorstep, I doubt. So it's all down to technology, and everything's done on the internet. So I think it is harder really now than it was, definitely. What really worries me at the moment, all the kids in drama school that are basically trying to get into the business and make a career in the profession. How do we know how this is all going to end up, and will they have a future in the business? And a friend of mine who runs a local dance academy in Southport said to me, these kids at the moment, it's hard to keep the interest when they know there may not be a future ahead,
What kind of director were you then? Were you quite a strict?
I was quite strict. Does that come over?
No, I'm sitting here like this with...
I was no messing. Yeah, I was a bit strict, I suppose. But I wouldn't expect anything from anybody else that I couldn't do myself, So I hopefully I was understanding as well, and try to bring out the best in people, really.
Of course. What was the first panto that you directed then?
I think the first one I directed would possibly be for Dougie. Although I had directed some on a holiday park that I ran for a while. I used to be entertainment manager at Barry Island. I had 30 Bluecoats there in 96 and 97. And we had a theatre there because it was the old Butlin site. And so to put my shows on in the Gaiety Theatre there was wonderful. And we did some pantomimes there. So I suppose I directed some there as well as for Dougie. But I think over the years I've virtually directed more or less every subject, I would think,
Any that are more challenging to direct?
I think Aladdin is probably more complex, maybe, because you need, everything has to be accurate with the cave and the genie and all basically pyrotechnics and I think probably it's a little bit more complex than some of the subjects.
Are you not a fan of Tech Week then?
Not particularly.
I don't think I've ever met anybody who's a fan of Tech Week.
No, not particularly. I mean, I've sat there till 1 a.m. at the Albert Halls and, lighting a show, only to have Dougie come the next day and change it all when I've sat there till 1 o'clock in the morning, But that's life, you know. Yeah.
What about your favourite people then you've directed?
Well, funny enough, I have a great love for Tom Ralph because I first knew him when he was like a 12-year-old lad at Billingham in the ensemble, and I used to go up and help direct there. Dougie would come for the first day and we'd maybe do a read through, and then you would leave it to me to put it together. And Tom, from a very early age, was very inquisitive, and you could tell he had a hunger for the business. And he was very easy to kind of direct in later years. And now he's directing me, and I work for him. And it's turned a circle, and it's wonderful.
Does it feel nice, though, to not direct? Or do you still have to give your little bit every now and then?
Every now and again, I'll put my 2 pennyworth in, yeah. But, you know, I don't kind of... I'm quite happy to be directed now, you know. I'm not stage struck anymore. Not really. I just like to work.
Did you ever get nervous?
I still do. I think when you stop getting nervous, that's the time to pack up. Really. There's always that first night nerves, I think, for a start, when you're doing the first performance. And then some people handle nerves in different ways. I tend to go quiet, where other people become loud. They walk around. I tend to stand in one space and just collect myself and go through a few lines in my head before I walk out. Yeah, that's my way of handling nerves. And then when I get out there and the lights hit me, I let myself go.
A phenomenon that I found out quite a while ago was the Panto Blues. So you spent all this time with people for weeks on end. A very intensive time of the year.
You become a family.
And then everybody goes their separate ways. And
yeah.
Do you suffer with the Panto Blues?
I think so, yes, because you do get close to people you work with. And particularly last year, we had such a lovely cast at Hunstanton, and I was really, really upset at the end of the season to say goodbye to them, you know. But some of them, actually, I would be appearing with again this year if it comes off, which would be wonderful. But yeah, I try not to let it affect me too much, but as you get older, you become perhaps a little more sentimental. Yeah, emotions take over.
You've got all these lovely posters everywhere, and as you said, some of them are now ghosts of the past, sadly.
Yeah.
Who have been your absolute diamonds that you've worked with?
Well, obviously I mentioned before John was one of them. And I actually stayed at John's house in Robert Close in Maida Vale a couple of times while I was touring with him. And he was so lovely to me. And when we finished the tour, he bought me an Edinburgh crystal glass decanter with 4 glasses, just as a thank you. And he was such a lovely man. And also I was very fond of Ruby Murray, big star of the 50s. And I used to put out some shows around clubs with an ex-partner of mine, and Ruby often worked for us. And she was a lovely, lovely lady. So again, another favourite of mine. And then as pantomime comics go, I don't think they come any better than Stu Francis. And I have great fondness for Stu, and we've worked together many, many times over the years, maybe 8 pantomimes, something like that. And then last year when I was appearing in Mother Goose, he surprised me with a presentation, which is hanging up in my bathroom at the moment, a poster signed by everybody in a big frame, and he had a bottle of champagne under his arm, and he came onto the stage on the finale and presented me with this bottle of champers and this presentation of the poster in a frame to celebrate my 50 years in show business. So it was a lovely thing for him to come over from Bolton to do for me. And I have great admiration for him as an artist, and love for him as a man. He's a lovely, lovely man.
He's been a guest on the podcast.
So I believe, yeah,
So
yeah,
I will show you how to do it. It's
yeah.
dead easy.
Oh right.
It really is. I put them all on YouTube as well. So
Uh-huh.
do you find yourself watching much YouTube yourself, or?
Yes. Looking back at the old stars, I often watch the old stars. Because it's something you just don't get on TV these days. Or rarely, anyway. Rarely. Sometimes you do, but I do watch Talking Pictures quite a bit.
Wonderful channel.
Yeah, yeah. Some films that never see the light of day, the old B films, I do love watching Talking Pictures. Yeah.
Lots of non-wisdom as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And the old British B films, black and white.
And
I love them.
Sunday night at the London
At the Palladium, yeah. Yeah.
Acts I've never even heard of before.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get little gems appear, and you think, wow, why did we never see them now?
Variety at its best, absolutely. Yeah.
So for you then, what makes a good pantomime?
I think that there has to be moments of pathos as much as anything else. And I always remember, I'm going back to John again now, but watching him appear as Mother Goose, I always remember when he'd sold Priscilla the goose and he was having second thoughts about what he had done. And he sat at the kitchen table and he sang Always Look for the Silver Lining. And it was an absolute magical moment in pantomime. And it almost brought me to tears. And but there again, he was an actor playing a dane, so he knew exactly what he was doing, But pathos, I think, is very important in pantomime.
Do you like a slush scene?
Oh, absolutely. I love a slush scene.
You don't see them much anymore.
No. But Damien and Tom often did the slush, which I love watching, very messy.
Controlled chaos.
Absolutely, yeah.
As a director, though, was that ever a problem to you? Did you ever think it was getting a bit out of hand sometimes?
That would depend on the artist. And if the artist tended to be a younger performer, they sometimes didn't know where to draw the line. Yeah. They would forget they were wearing a microphone, for one thing. And we'd get through a lot of, mic heads. So it is important, I suppose, to be disciplined at the same time. But slush, the kids just love it, don't they?
They really do.
Yeah.
And I think that, for me, slosh, the pathos,
Yeah.
and the whole audience interaction as well.
Yeah.
You can't.
Very important.
They are the last member of the cast.
Yeah. Yeah. And as I said before, kids' first introduction to theatre, and one would hope then they get interested, and then they go back and they watch other things and keep our great traditions going.
Do you ever get to see many other pantos?
Not usually, because I'm usually working at that particular time of year. Although on occasions I have, and we may visit friends in neighbouring towns to go and see their panto, and then they come see our panto. And there is like a camaraderie, and you become a family, and then extended family with people that are working in other shows. It's a great business.
Your Christmas card list must be horrendous.
Do you know that's so expensive? It's getting worse every year and bigger. Yeah. It's not quite the same just sending greetings on the internet.
No.
I try and do it once a year and send cards in the proper way, and write a few little personal things in each card.
Have you ever had a Christmas off?
Never. So if we can't work this year, then it will be the first break in 51 years, which will be very sad.
might enjoy it though.
Well, my mum keeps telling me it would be lovely to have you home for Christmas for once. No, I don't relish it because to me Christmas is pantomime. The one goes hand in glove with the other.
Are you not a fan of Easter pantos then?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I enjoyed our Easter pantomimes that I've worked for Tom. We've done, I think, apart from Mother Goose, we did Sleeping Beauty on 2 occasions. And pantomime, I think, works well at Easter. The right subject, I would say. Not all subjects, but some work better at Easter than others. And then there are some subjects that you can perform all year round, like Peter Pan, Alice in Wonderland, things like that, that are not traditionally Christmas pantomimes that you can work any time of year.
Are there any pantomimes that you think should be brought back?
Well, Mother Goose for one, definitely, because I've always adored that storyline. There's everything in that. The pathos, the fairy, the villain. And it's a magical show because the kids love the goose for one thing.
You've got to have a good goose. Though.
A good goose, and we did have a good goose. Mind you, it was huge, but we did have a good goose. And our goose was played by a very dear friend of mine called Steve, and he was absolutely wonderful. He was so animated, and it was so believable how you could get so much character come through the skin. It was amazing, really. Every little gesture was there. It was wonderful.
This year they were going to try Humpty Dumpty in Newcastle, weren't they?
Yeah, I'd like to see that come back too.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one.
And I did Robinson Crusoe when I was very young. Played Robinson Crusoe when I was a principal boy. And that's never done very often these days. So I'd like to quite see that come back. I remember one called Goody Two Shoes, I think. That I don't really remember the story of that. But I remember it was pretty big in its heyday.
That's the thing with titles like Humpty Dumpty, Goody Two Shoes, even Puss in Boots in a way.
Puss in Boots.
You can really...
that was a good story, Puss in Boots. And I did that with Lisa Stansfield, actually. That was a good production.
I haven't seen a Puss in Boots in years.
No.
It's funny, isn't it? How times change and how kind of Cinderella and Aladdin, and they're kind of the bankers, aren't they? You know that you're gonna, what you're gonna go and see, and some people might.
That's it. Yeah.
Might take a chance.
I think Snow White's always a big draw as well. Anything that's Disney has kind of turned into a film, obviously works well. So Snow White is a big pull. Aladdin's a big pull. But I suppose Cinderella tops everything, really. So magical for the children.
Have you been Buttons before?
I haven't been Buttons, but I've been Baron Hardup on many occasions. And I've been an Ugly Sister a couple of times.
Well, how was that then?
That works quite well, really, because you're not completely on your own like you are as a dame, so you can share the comedy, which is good. And if you have a really good person to work with and you really bounce off each other, it can be a wonderful part to play.
And the wicked streak as well.
Oh, yes, absolutely. The tearing up of the ticket scene is probably a favourite. When you can be really nasty.
Wicked.
Yeah. And the kids really hate you. Yeah, it's wonderful.
So coming out then to Booze as a baddie or as an ugly sister, how did that feel that first time?
I wasn't sure, first of all, when I first played a villain, because I thought I'd always had a cheer walking down on the walk down, and then of course everyone boos, and you think, oh well, yeah, I've done the job right then. So equally it is as satisfying because you get the reaction from the kids, and if they do hate you, then you know you've done the job right. I mean, some kids, would be crying before I got the second line out, So I had to soften myself a couple of times. And I was approached on a couple of occasions by theatre managers to tone it down a little bit, that I was told I was too frightening.
Who then were your influences for your baddies?
Alan Curtis. I can say that without any, hesitation. He was the greatest baddie that I ever saw in pantomime. And he always appeared at the Palladium as the baddie. And then later years he appeared in Up Pompeii. And he was a wonderful, wonderful actor. And he could pull it back and then move it around and play around with it, and a bit Faginish, and then a bit, if he was playing Abanazar, it was just absolutely a masterclass to watch. He was a great villain. And he also learnt me to sword fight as well, because he was very much into that. And he was very, very good stuntman as well. I'm not sure whether he's still with us, actually, to be honest. But he was a superb villain.
How do you look after the voice?
To be honest, I don't take any great precautions, as I should, and I don't exercise like I used to when I was a singer. So
there could be young kids listening to this, you know.
Yeah. Well, you get very lazy as you get older. So I might be in the car driving to a gig and go, me. That's it. I've done it. So, I've become a little bit lazy, but I think anyone going into the business needs to warm up before a performance. That would be my recommendation, particularly if they're singing songs with high ranges. Well, basically just being sensible. Don't expose yourself to the elements too much, and always wear a scarf around your throat. Keep your throat warm. I do believe in honey. I think honey is a wonderful thing, particularly for a singer anyway.
And the dreaded lurgy comes around.
Pantomime throat and
yes,
and colds, and you can work through a cold, but once it goes to your chest, that's a nightmare to keep the chest clear, because come with the winter, unfortunately, we get all the usual things, don't we? But I do try and have early nights as well. I think that's important if you're performing every day. So although I enjoy a drink, and I wouldn't pretend I didn't, I do try and get a good few hours sleep as well, Yeah.
No wild parties during Panto then?
Well, it's been known, but not so much.
I was going to say I have heard.
Yes, but not so much these days. But I don't deny I like a drink, but I would still try and rather go early doors to a pub after rehearsals. Say you went straight from rehearsals at 6 and then till about 9, and then go back and make sure you get a good night's sleep before rehearsals the next day. It's important, because once you go without sleep as well, that's when you become vulnerable, and that's when you catch colds.
Have you ever had to step in for people over the years?
No, I've not actually stepped in for people. I've usually managed to kind of delegate and find a way around things. We did have an unfortunate situation a few years ago at Bolton when a dear performer who was playing one of the Ugly Sisters passed away during the run. And that was a bit of a problem to sort out at the time, because we had a performance the next morning, but we didn't, as it happened, miss a performance. I dragged a person from here and a person from there, and we moved things around, and we got over it. But it was such a devastating time for everybody that was concerned in the production. And we'd all been out having a drink with this particular person, who was a dear man and a lovely performer. And it was absolutely devastating to everyone in the company. And you never quite get over anything like that happening in a season. It does put the damper on everything, really.
How did you deal with that?
Well, on a personal level, I tried to distance myself from my emotions and try and basically keep the show together. And we brought several people in for a few days to play his role. What was very upsetting was his partner came in one day to collect makeup from the dressing room and saw someone else in his partner's clothes, which was an awful thing to see. He did allow us to keep his partner's clothes so we could use them until such time as we managed to get our hands on other costumes. But it was an awful time, absolutely awful. I mean, I don't know why, but Christmas, there seems to be so much death around, people you hear of, and it's highlighted, isn't it? Because at Christmas, everyone should be happy.
Emotions, yeah.
Yeah. And yet these awful things seem to happen around Christmas, I remember one Christmas Eve, like Andy Eastwood's father dying, that was awful. And of course Andy had to leave the show and go and comfort his mother and be with his mum. And for a few performances, we had to talk about wishy-washy rather than see a wishy-washy. And these things have a habit of happening around Christmas. And I don't know why. But maybe it's just because it's highlighted at that time of year.
It's one of those things, though, isn't it?
But the show must go on, and it does. And that's what we all have to remember, isn't it? All those people that have paid for a ticket out there to be entertained, and one has to pick yourself up and carry on,
So what would you say then are your highlights of your career?
Highlights? Yes, there have been many, really. I think probably one of the highlights was when I was told that I'd got into the minstrels because I'd watched it on TV for so long, and I was really into Jolson in a big way. Ever since a kid, I watched the Jolson Story on a Saturday morning picture show. We used to go to the Government Club every Saturday morning, my brother and I. And one particular Saturday they played the Jolson Story, and watching Larry Parks up there performing as Jolson, I was absolutely hooked on that type of music. And I wanted to sing the Jolson songs, which when I joined the Minstrels, I happened to be able to do that. So it was a great joy to me when they told me I'd got through, because on the first audition they told me my movement wasn't good enough, although actually the voice was okay. And that's when I went off and had the dancing lessons, and then I went back and tried again and got in. So it was a great joy to me to be able to go and tell people I had at last got into the show.
And that was a juggernaut of a show at the time, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Summer seasons.
Oh, everywhere, yeah.
TV.
Yeah, 18 years on TV, yeah. People forget, I think, how long it was on.
And kind of now...
Now it's outlawed, unfortunately. Sad to say. And I don't think, I know political correctness these days, some people consider it's gone mad, but I don't think it was meant to degrade black people in any way whatsoever. It was just a family entertainment with all kinds of music that appealed to all ages as well.
Were there ever any concerns at the time from people?
No, the only time I do recall any type of protest was years later. We did a minstrel reunion show for Dougie Chapman, of which I was part, and John Inman was the top of the. John Bolter was the top of the bill. John Bolter, the tenor from the minstrels, and we went to I think it was the Custom House at North Shields or South Shields. South Shields. And we had a protest there. And I remember people coming around and saying, oh, well, if we were going to black up, they'd have to pull the show. And John said, well, if we don't black up, the show doesn't go on, because that's what the show is. And he stuck to his guns and they backed down, and the show did go on. But we were under pressure to pull the show.
What kind of year was that?
96. So I suppose, yes, political correctness had crept in a big way by then.
What have been your favourite theatres then to play in the UK?
Oh, well, I've got a lot of favourites. I love the Matchams theatres. The Everyman at Cheltenham, Bath Theatre Royal, Alhambra Bradford, Leeds Grand, and our own theatre here in Blackpool, the Grand. That's a wonderful example of, I think, a Matchams theatre at its best. The art decor is wonderful. Yeah, there's been so many lovely theatres around the country. Obviously, we've lost a lot of the famous ones as well over the years, unfortunately.
And what about audiences then? Because sometimes this north-south divide where they laugh more in the north. And
yeah, I think people are more reserved down south, definitely. The northerners like a good laugh, without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah. And, it is strange. Like, I come from mid-England, from Redditch in Worcestershire, originally. And we have a beautiful little theatre there called the Palace. And that's a Victorian theatre. But even in the Midlands, I think people are a little bit more reserved than they are in the north. If I walk into my local, and I ask a question, I get a conversation in Blackpool. Whereas down south, you just get an answer, a yes or no answer. So there is a difference, I think. And I think the northern audiences do tend to be a little warmer. Although, having said that, I do love some of the theatres around London. When we went round London with Wheel Meet Again, because I toured with that for 13 years for Dougie Chapman, and we played every major theatre over and over again over 13 years. And we did a lot around London, and London audiences were wonderful. They really got into the wartime spirit and the wartime songs. So, it's not all bad below the north-south divide. It depends on the area, I think.
Do you ever feel like you were born in the wrong era?
Oh, most certainly, yeah. Oh, yes, because I just love all the old weepy films, and I miss the heyday of the musical. I would have been in my element in the heyday of the musical. I did get the end of the spectacular shows with the Bachelors and the Minstrels. And I feel sorry in some ways that perhaps performers up and coming now won't get to appear in such spectacular productions where it's all down to costs and smaller productions. But I got kind of the tail end of the spectacular shows. But I would have loved to have toured in the old days around the halls. That would have been wonderful.
When you're doing the We'll Meet Again tours, and even now you're still, well, once lockdown's over, hopefully you can
get back to it.
Be back out there and get that sort of British spirit back again. And it must be lovely, though, to be able to rekindle as well memories of some of the older folk as well.
Yeah, yeah. It does keep me young to a certain extent, I think, as well. Keeps my energy levels up. Because, although I'm 70, by no way do I feel like throwing in the towel.
How old do you feel then? I
feel about 50. So is that pushing it? No, I still have, a good energy level, I think, as a dame as well. Some people will think, oh, no, we can't employ him. He's 70 years old. There won't be an energy level. Well, I don't always agree with that, because I've seen some younger performers who you would think would have lots of energy put nothing into a performance at all. So it depends on the individual, really.
Was that frustrating watching that as a director?
Very much so, yeah. Seeing people walk a performance annoys me more than anything else.
Oh, it annoys me as a spectator.
Yeah, yeah.
And it does happen.
It does happen. And sometimes, when you see young people walk it, and you think, really, they've got the energy, and they should know better. Particularly if they've been to a good theatre school and, they've learnt their craft. They should be giving everything, really.
There isn't really the sort of training ground anymore.
No.
For the younger ones.
No.
To perform, apart from stage schools and
yeah.
college courses.
Yeah.
What would you recommend to yourself or somebody else now?
I think holiday parks, I think that they were a great training ground. In the old days they were called camps. But if one got the opportunity to perform your own thing or be involved in a production, it's all great experience. And then when you apply for your first theatre job, I think you have more chance of being able to sell what you can offer. And I know a lot of friends of mine started in holiday parks, and it was a great grounding in its day, And I did many seasons on holiday parks, because in '92 I was made entertainment director of Holly Marine, and we had 14 sites, and I would go from one site to the other, troubleshooting, giving out little tidbits of advice to certain people if I felt they needed it. It didn't always fall on good ears, but sometimes people would turn a deaf ear to what I was saying, but hopefully, they did take on board some of the kind of information I was trying to give them. And I've seen many people come up through that vehicle of holiday parks. So I would say to anybody, really, it's great grounding, great experience. If you can get a job on a holiday park and they do in-house production, then it's a great grounding for theatre. Some people have frowned on it over the years, and even when I was an entertainment manager at Barry Island Resort, people would come up to me and say, I love your voice, you sing well. Have you ever thought of turning professional? And I would say, well, I used to be, and leave it at that. Because it never quite carried the status that theatre work carried. But at the same time, it was brilliant grounding for any entertainer before they embark on, say, a career in the theatre. And it shouldn't be underestimated.
One thing I was actually thinking a while ago was we've seen this resurgence of old movies with this wonderful TV channel Talking Pictures. There should be some form of radio equivalent, I think, for forgotten songs. Pull out the 78s.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was brought up on the stars of the 50s when I was growing up. My auntie would play David Whitfield all day long, and you know, and Ruby Murray and the stars of the day. And I kind of got hooked on those big ballad singers. All sadly now never seem to see the light of day, which is a shame.
Some of the old songs, though, do you ever try and incorporate them in pantomime?
I have in the past, although one's always been told really keep everything up to date and modern, so the kids identify with it. So I suppose that is important these days, to keep the bums on the seats.
Because Kudos the other year introduced Gilly Gillios and Pfeffer.
Oh, did they?
And that was a surprise.
Right.
And that really worked well.
As a song sheet?
As a song sheet.
Right.
And I was sitting there and I thought, that's a Max Bygrave song.
Yeah, it was.
And they're never going to know what this is. And by the end of it, everybody was leaving the theatre singing it. And it just goes to show you that it's cyclical with music. And I do think some of the older songs, Don't Laugh at Me Because I'm a Fool.
Oh, that's a wonderful song.
A beautiful song.
Yeah.
I don't see any reason why.
Now that would work perfect with Buttons in Cinderella. Yeah.
And I've never seen that.
Yeah. I saw a lovely moment when I saw Des O'Connor play Buttons, and he had a song out at the time called I Pretend. And he sat there in the fireplace, and she had gone off to the ball, sitting here so lonely in the firelight. And all the lyrics just fitted perfectly into that scenario. So, you know, it was a magical moment.
Have you ever been tempted to write a panto?
No, although I do know all the gags inside out. Yeah, it's easy to let someone else do it and I'll work for them.
Okay, fair enough. Well, this is going to lead me on to my last question. Your dream pantomime. So you can be in it, you can choose the production, you can choose the theatre, and your cast can be alive or dead, or a mixture of both.
Right. Well, my ideal pantomime would be my favourite of all time, which is Mother Goose. Obviously, I would love to play Mother Goose at our Grand Theatre here in Blackpool. And I couldn't think of anything to top that. That would be absolute magic.
And who'd be alongside you?
All the people that have looked after me over the years, and the kind people, like Tom Ralph, and people like that, and really good, solid pros, what I would call jobbing actors that don't often get the accolade they deserve, that usually have to carry the show for maybe other people at the top of the bill who don't have the talent that some of these people have.
And I'm sure you'll tell me then after I've pushed the stop button.
Correct.
Well, thank you so much for taking part in the Panto podcast.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much for asking me, Aidan.